it occurred to me while making the beginner's still life tutorial that the use sky feature was really very powerful and super useful, and so I thought I would do a tutorial that just focused on using the use sky feature. As is default scene setup, I've just put an object in the scene and this sphere which has ambient response, just so I can keep a track of the ambient response. As things stand, we've got a default sky, and in the Skylab 100% shadow intensity. So you go in here and render in scene, you can see we've got our little scene. So let's get straight in and use sky dome only, use sky, and I'm going to set the quality down to 16, so that means there's 16 simulated light sources that have been generated in this area, which is half the sky. I'm going to increase the HDRI effect so we can see some shadows occurring in the scene, and the sunlight's automatically disabled by generating the sky. So let's see how things have changed. So HDRI effect 16, so we should expect 16 or so shadows to be generated, because the underside of the HDRI is fully black, so it can't put any light sources in there. It uses this thing called the Monte Carlo algorithm apparently to distribute the light sources in the backdrop. And so intense light sources are likely to appear where there are very bright spots in the sky, and none where it's black, because there's no point, because there's no light coming from there. Now the first thing to look at is, if you're only using half the sky, you're not going to bother moving the HDRI around, rolling it about as you would the sun, then there's no point in generating any light sources underneath the ground. So if I go into the scene, save this camera view, edit it, and then lower the camera control here, so I'm looking underground and pointing up at the infinite plane, and I'll create a, let's say I'll create a pyramid and lower that below the ground level, so you can see it's there below the ground, and point up at that, and I'll save that as a second viewpoint. You can see the pyramid there because of the haze, but it's not lit. Likewise, if we were to introduce some sky dome colour, then it should light the sides. It's not very clear there actually. I'll make it much brighter, I'll make it white. I usually do it a colour so that it's clear that which part it is, but here you can see the pyramid is lit by the sky dome because it allows it to pass straight through the ground. Likewise, I'll just reduce that to 0 now. If we had some ambient component, I'll take this sphere and I'll bury it halfway in and halfway out of the ground, so that you can see that ambient is working underground, no problem, as you might expect. But also, if we go into the Skylab, the global intensity control will allow light to travel through from above. So if we turn this down, you can see it in the preview here, it's showing up in various degrees. Image-based lighting has a similar control, but it's not a global control. It's just tied into the HDRI light, so reducing the intensity in here will mean that all light sources will let light travel through objects, though you'll still have self-shadowing from the object geometry. Okay, we'll go back into the image-based lighting and we'll turn the sky dome only off and regenerate the HDRI. It's remained at the 50 value, so we don't need to worry about that. And then I'll switch to the overhead view. So here we were before. Now you should see there are going to be less light sources, but it also depends on the brightness of the HDRI under the ground. So there should be some variation there, and we should see, in theory, and I'll switch to the other view, that this was receiving some light, but I can't see any evidence of that. So even though there's some light down there, it may be that it's not bright enough to warrant a light source. So what we'll do is we'll see if we can trick it by turning the effect right up, and see now that there are light sources, but they're quite faint. So these lights will be wasted as far as the overhead view is concerned, which is now totally burned out because of the intensity. And so that is the reason why you would use sky dome only, because you will generate more lights above the surface. But you might want to do this for different reasons. This is where the power of this control comes in. So I'll turn that back down to 50. Let's start manipulating the sky to create the light we want. So let's say I want 3 different colours of light distributed across the sky, or maybe even 4. Okay, let's do 4. So I'm going to go and set custom sky, which allows me to control the sky colour and the sundome colour. We'll leave the sky colour as blue and set the sundome colour, hold the Alt key down, to something else. I'll get rid of the green and make it magenta. And you can already see in the preview that that's had an effect. Okay, and I'm going to set the fog colour to, I don't know, green. And what else is available? Sky colour, fog colour, haze. We'll have the haze as red. Right, and now I'll go into the sky. What I could do with is being able to see this sky, so I can tilt this around here. So red haze. In the atmosphere I can control these quite exactly. Now if I do 100, 10, 100, I can get some fog on the ground. It doesn't matter because I can turn the atmosphere off if it starts interfering with the scene. This is for setting the HDRI up, and I can set the haze up here. If I set that at 100 it becomes very thick. I could set it down at say 15 so it becomes a band, or 10 so it becomes a band. It's difficult to predict how much effect it's going to have until it's converted. And you can see the clouds are still there, so I'm going to turn the clouds off. So now if I look round, you'll see we've got this very bright magenta area and the sun in the sky. But if I add the sun to into the image-based lighting by just using the sky like this, the intensity of the sun will tend to dominate all the light sources. So the answer is to set the sun's diffuse value down at 0, and then if I use the sky, it'll have the colour there, but that white won't be multiplied by the intensity of the sun. And I can show you that quite easily. Right, so here we are. You can see everything's being dominated by the fog. So if I just turn the atmosphere off and then go back into the Skylab and adjust the level up, so we're using the HDRI, so because this green's underground we're not having the effect of that light, we've just got these bluey and red, so it's a predominantly purple. So I'll just switch to the underground view to show you that the green light's arriving, as you might expect, and go back to the top view and show you the purple light's arriving. That's just the coloured lighting from the HDRI, and the advantage of using the use sky is if we want to increase the quality, I don't need to add any more light sources. I can just change the quality setting, or alternatively have the quality down and introduce shadow softness. But what I want to show you is the importance of adding the diffuse value in. So while it might look the same, remembering that I've got to go back to custom sky to get all these effects active to be captured. So HDRI looks really just the same as it did before, but this bright spot here is actually going to be a lot brighter than the monitor can display, because we're limited to interpreting this is high dynamic range image, but the monitor can only display low dynamic range. So when we go back and out of the Skylab and turn the atmosphere off and render, even though I've not made any changes, you can see there's a lot more light and there's one dominant shadow, and that's because the sun's diffuse value has now been stored within the HDRI light. And because that's become a dominant light source, the Monte Carlo algorithms looked through it, found it, and assigned a light source to it with that intensity. So if we want general ambient lighting, the answer is when you generate it, you can still have it visible, but you have to cut the diffuse. Image-based lighting is not very good at producing specular output, and there are other tutorials that show you how to do that. So we're just focusing on the diffuse light in this. So now if I use sky, steady on, I've got to remember to go back to my custom sky, so I've got all the fog and haze effects ready to be captured. If I use sky again, captured it without the diffuse intensity of the sun, go back, check out, turn the atmosphere off so we can get to see what's going on, and then go back into the image-based lighting tab. The point of this was start turning it around and you can start mixing the colours together. So now you can see on here, this preview, we need a bit more light. the effect of having the different coloured lights available in the sky, which was kind of the point of this tutorial. So what I wanted to show was the way you can combine these things. And if you then want to go back and have haze, you can have whatever sky you want, because it's still going to be stored in the HDR. So let us say, I'm going to brighten this up a bit, that you're happy with this effect. You've got a couple of ways of saving this. You could save by adding to the Skylab. So I add this HDRI green and purple, and the fact that this sky's got a HDRI associated with it is indicated by this H, which is one way. But bear in mind, as I've been discussing on the forum, each of these categories has a limit of 2 GB, and HDRs can take up a lot of memory depending on the quality of them, resolution of them. So if you have a high resolution HDRI image like one of Horrow's that you're using as a backdrop and you want it to be really crisp, then that could absorb hundreds of megabytes just saving it as a sky. And so you have to be careful how many you save, otherwise once it exceeds its 2 GB limit for the category, so like this category is video, it will break and you won't be able to access any of the skies that you've saved there, which is slightly annoying. So there is that way of saving, and that's all very well, but the limitation of the saving the skies. Another thing, actually I'll mention this while we're at it, there are the sky dots here. So suppose we save a sky as we saved a camera position, move the sun round or move the HDR, saved again, saved again, saved again. Those all get saved with the source file. Now if you've got 100 megabyte HDR in your sky, and then you save the sky position, and even though you don't change the HDR, you save another sky position with a slight change, it goes 100 megabyte, 200 megabyte, 300 megabyte, 400 megabyte, 500 megabyte. Suddenly you've got 500 megs, and this is going to break the file. And Bryce isn't very good at garbage collection, so even if you deselect these, there's no guarantee the file is going to shrink when you save it. So be a bit careful saving the skies if you've got a HDRI in your sky. Anyway, that's by the by. Want to save this HDRI, then you can export it. You just do export the image, and then choose a format, which will be HDR. It's light probe, that's fine, and then just save that. Then we'll go back in here and say we want a different sky to go with this setup. So we've got the light sorted, that's no problem. What we want is a different sky. So I'll go in here and we'll bring out one of the default skies. There's daytime. There we go. We'll use this one, and then that's been loaded in. But the HDRI lighting and image is gone. So we'll go into the Skylab. You can see it's there because it was the last file used. So we can actually summon it back in, and we can start working with it. So that wasn't a very good example because it's there. So what I'm going to do is uncheck that, and then Control Z, which will restore the sky but without the HDRI. So that's another useful thing to note, and we'll render that now. And then I'll go in and bring in the sky that I've saved. So you use HDRI image and open instead of use sky, then navigate to where you saved it, and you can open it up. Sunlight's automatically disabled, and then start modifying the settings. It's not rotated because it doesn't save any rotational value, so you have to remember what setting you like. So let's swizzle it around here. Because we've loaded it and not created it from the sky, it's automatically used it as a backdrop that's blended into the background of the sky. So you can see the reflections have changed here. If you don't want it as a backdrop, just uncheck that dot there. Actually, I quite like it as a backdrop. And what I'm going to do is add it to the sky. So whatever's there in the sky, this will be added on top of it, so it'll increase the intensity. The default setting of the quality for a HDRI image is 256. Lower it to 16 for previewing, and then we'll have a look at what we've got. Okay, even though this sky had haze settings before, loading in the HDRI image as opposed to generating one has a slightly different effect on the atmospherics. It does tend to turn things off. So if you hold the Alt key down, you can restore, oops, not the Alt key, that's to turn them off. I'm telling you wrong. If you just click on them, it'll turn them back on. Okay, hold the Alt key to turn them off. Right, so that's brought the haze back in, which is maybe what we wanted, and we've got the clouds in there that's been added to the brightly coloured sky. But bear in mind, when you load a sky from the library, it could be, as this one is, set up for easy rendering without any fancy lighting. So it's got some things working against you, like the ambient, like the sky dome colour, and like, if we nip in here it's easier to see it, intensity control. And you can set these up without going into the Skylab. Intensity, if you hover over here, now that controls the shadow intensity. Left click and it'll show you the value in the bottom corner. Drag it to the right while holding down, you can set the shadow intensity 100. To get rid of ambient, because you see that sphere was glowing there, you can just hold Alt key down, click on the colour swatch, and that'll set it to 0. That'll stop that glowing. And to get rid of sky dome colour, well, we've already set one to 0, so left click and you can drag it over to where you've got black, and that will set that. And so that's improved the contrast of your image. Of course, there might be situations where you want to use any or all of these controls, but be wary about using these, because if you are using them to replace complex lighting, then the results will not be as good as using complex lighting. So, as things stand, all very well, but the shadow banding is rather ugly, so let's overcome that. We use image-based lighting and turn the quality up, and then I'll just plop render a small area, and you can see that that's sorted that out. Obviously, if we render the whole thing, this is going to be slightly time consuming. Let's see what's it saying. Well, 20 minutes, but you will have very good shadow resolution. Alternatively, you could lower the quality to 16 and up the shadow softness, and that will have a different effect, but it will still result in a nice effect. It's about half the time for that if you choose that option, and you've got distinct light sources but with softened shadows, so that the effect of that is rather nice. Going further, you could go really fancy and still using the HDRI backdrop, choose obscure lighting. So I'll just show you quickly how to set that up. There are videos that are dedicated to that, but the process I'll not explain it, I'll just show you what the process is. You need to create a radial light, or modify the family so we can identify that as a special light. There we go, I'll call that obscure light. The name of that light must be background. Edit that light, do true ambience optimization, use gel, include only background, so it's targeting itself. This excludes other controls from having an effect on the light we want. Go into procedural and reset to default material. That's so it's got a diffuse surface. Even though you can't see the diffuse surface, the lighting method we're going to use can. So that's how it works. I'm going to edit that and enlarge it so it encompasses our scene. That's fair enough. And then go into the Skylab and choose light from inside. Turn cast shadows off, that makes it work more efficiently. It'll work with low quality, no problem. We need to apply to light source, get rid of the specular output, it's irrelevant, and must disable true ambience optimization. And what's vitally important here is that we select include only background. This means it targets the background, which happens to be what we've named the light source. The reason for doing it that way around is because it's not possible to target a light source directly. I'll check out now. I'm going to choose to turn the atmosphere off and set it to fully black, so we're just adding in the sky, and then I'm going to go to the render options, premium effects, true ambience, TA scatter correction, boost light, turn the maximum radii down to 4 and lower the raise per pixels to 4 just so we can preview it. We won't see any effect in here unless we still can't see any effect in here. Usually if you've got accurate rendering on, you can see that you've got true ambience working, but it's possible that we've not got enough light output yet. We can just see vaguely there's something going on here. The reason for turning the sky off was just because I wanted to show you the influence of the HDRI backdrop, which gets added in outside the area of effect of this lighting. Inside the circle, which is the area defined by the light source, you can see that the lighting looks quite different from the outside. So just by turning the atmosphere off, you've removed all the other things that might be affecting it. So you can consider in isolation what's going on. So here on the outside, that's light from the HDRI that's being picked up by the image of the HDRI that's creating that effect, but it's not very strong, nor is any of the lighting in here very strong. So what you need to do is go into the image-based lighting and start increasing either the intensity, but that will affect the reflection. So we can increase the intensity, get stronger reflection, and but otherwise we've got plenty of headroom with this effect control. So we can just increase the effect this way and see if that gives us enough light from the control. So there we've got, well, quite a bit of light. We could have more light. I'll go back in, and unfortunately it's not possible to preview this effect in any way through this preview here, and at the moment we're not seeing anything from there either because of the way this effect works. So now you can see that we've got quite a bit of light in that area, and it's dictated as it was before, because what's happening is that it's lighting the light source from the inside, and the light source is then sending transience light in. If we want this area to be fully black, then we can just switch it off, and then you'll just have what's going on inside, and immediately all the noise that was coming from the HDRI background as a visible object has vanished, but you've lost your reflections. So there's a bit of a conflict there. If you want to get the reflections and have that black, then you can shuffle things around again. So we could go use this backdrop, but we go custom sky, and we will set all these values to fully black, and then we can choose black haze and set a wall of haze up. Now we can see that the thing itself has vanished, so we need to modify the haze so it's thick, so it's dense but its thickness is low, so that'll make quite a tall wall. And if we can position this accordingly, so we can cover up what we're seeing in the sky there without losing too much light on the object itself with the dense haze, like so. So that's cut the background out, but again you're getting this noise from the HDRI as a visible object in the sky, so that can be cut out again with a radial light. This is a different property. I'll set it white, and I'll edit this. Transience use gel, include only, background procedural, set to default, then set to fully black. This won't be a light source, this is just going to be the TA firewall. Like I say, there are more tutorials on this to understand what's going on, but that just cuts any transience light coming from the outside, and so you can see we've restored the background there to being fully black. There's nothing to stop you at this point going into the skyline, whoops, don't mean to do that, and re-enabling the sun to have that act as a light source. And since we're already using premium effects, you can use soft shadows, bring that in as a light source, and balance that off against the existing light. You can see that that does exceed beyond the circle and provides a shadow there. The shadow doesn't look softened yet because with premium effects it doesn't happen automatically. You'll need to use soft shadows. So I'll just swivel that round a bit. That's quite strong, but you can see it's softened now. It's not softened as much as the HDRI softens works because they're different softnesses, and it also looks different to regular softness as well. And perhaps the last thing to do, because this is a still life one and we're already using premium effects, we could target one of the insect legs or maybe one of these spheres in its body. We'll use the body, and go to render options and use depth of field, and from the camera view set to current selection, and that will give us a depth of field view effect as well, which if it's tuned correctly it doesn't have to be very strong, it could just give you a greater sense of three-dimensionality on this model. The last thing to do is to set the render options up. Raise per pixel 256 will give the best resolution and get rid of most of this noise, but it will result in a longer render time, as you can see from this first pass. The reflectiveness of this model will slow things down because the interreflections will spawn more light gathering points for the effect. So there you go. I'll leave this to render out and use it for the at the beginning of the tutorial. I hope you found that interesting. It took a slightly different direction towards the end than I anticipated, but hopefully you'll see how it's possible to use the sky control to create your own lighting environment at quite a high degree of control before you have to start exploring external software to create HDRI images of your own. Or you can use there is a tool that Horo and I made that allows you to capture HDRI images in Bryce, so you don't have to go outside for other stuff. Or alternatively, you could equip yourself with one of Horo's excellent HDRI image packages. And that's covered in other tutorials, the way to use those. This really is just about using the Use Sky control to create some interesting lighting within Bryce. That's the end of the tutorial.